As the morning sun streamed into the streets of Philadelphia, Margaret Wilson was already awake. She gazed at the skyscrapers visible from her window as she took a sip of coffee. Today was a special day. After years of hard work, she had finally secured a position as a senior financial analyst at the prestigious investment firm Bradford Capital. "Mom, today's your final interview, right?" came Samantha's voice from behind her. Still in her pajamas, the 10-year-old girl rested her chin on her mother's shoulder. Margaret smiled and gently stroked her daughter's hair. "Today is just a formality, dear. I've already received the offer. It's just the final paperwork and an office tour." Samantha hugged her mother. "Congratulations. I know you'll do an amazing job." Margaret felt a warmth in her heart at her daughter's words. For 10 years as a single mother, she had worked desperately to raise her daughter while simultaneously building her career. She had attended night school to earn her qualifications, gained experience at smaller companies, and finally secured an offer from an industry leader. It hadn't been an easy road, but she felt a sense of pride in herself for never giving up. While preparing breakfast, Margaret thought about her mother, Eleanor Wilson. Her mother had worked as an executive secretary at a large Philadelphia corporation for over 30 years and maintained extensive connections in the business world even after retirement. However, her relationship with Margaret had never been particularly good. Especially after her younger sister Vanessa was born, her mother's affection had clearly shifted toward Vanessa. Despite graduating from college, Vanessa had never held a proper job and continued to live comfortably in their mother's home. Still, her mother called Vanessa "my jewel" and continued to spoil her. "Mom, we're going to Grandma's house this evening, right?" Samantha asked as she spread jam on her toast. Margaret sighed. "Yes, I need to tell her about my job offer." In truth, Margaret had mixed feelings about sharing the news with Eleanor. Her mother would outwardly celebrate her daughter's success, but whether she was genuinely happy was doubtful. In the past, she had made comments like, "A single mother couldn't possibly work at such a large company." Nevertheless, Margaret intended to inform Eleanor out of a sense of duty both as an adult and as a daughter. "I want to show Grandma my new drawing," Samantha said. "Of course, we'll bring it along," Margaret replied, though inwardly she was reluctant. Eleanor was cold to Samantha as well. She seemed to hold prejudice against children of single parents, and showed little affection even to her own granddaughter. Meanwhile, Vanessa often made blatantly nasty remarks toward Margaret and Samantha. She would say things like, "Big sister had a child when she was young and gave up on any career," or, "Children from single-parent homes tend to become problem children, don't they?" She had no qualms about saying such things even in front of Samantha. Margaret glanced at the clock and hurriedly began to get ready. "Sam, we're going to be late for school. Hurry up." After dropping her daughter off at school, Margaret headed to Bradford Capital. Standing in front of the skyscraper, she took a deep breath. This was the moment when all her hard work would pay off. She reminded herself that she had earned this position through her own abilities and efforts. In the evening, Margaret picked up her daughter Samantha from school, and they headed to her mother Eleanor's house together. In the car, Margaret said to her daughter, "No matter what Grandma and Aunt Vanessa say, don't let it bother you. We'll be fine as long as we have each other." Samantha nodded slightly. "I know, Mom. I'm proud of you." Encouraged by those words, Margaret rang Eleanor's doorbell, inwardly anxious about how her job news would be received. A week passed. Margaret was preparing for her first day at her new workplace the following week. She had gathered all the necessary documents and mentally prepared herself. Her daughter Samantha was excited about her mother's new job and kept asking, "Can I see a picture of your desk?" That afternoon, Margaret's smartphone rang. The screen displayed Bradford Capital. Thinking it was probably a final confirmation call, Margaret answered with a smile. "Hello, this is Margaret Wilson." However, The words she heard from the other end of the line left her frozen. "Ms. Wilson, this is James Collins from Human Resources. I'm calling to confirm something." The male voice sounded confused. "We recently received notice from your mother that you would be declining the position." Margaret couldn't believe her ears. "What? Declining? I haven't declined anything. There must be some mistake." On the other end of the phone, James could be heard shuffling papers. "Well, we received communication from Eleanor Wilson stating that due to family circumstances, Margaret Wilson would be declining the position." My mother. Margaret was speechless. Various thoughts swirled in her head. Why would her mother do something like this without her knowledge? "I'm sorry, this is a huge misunderstanding. I'll come explain immediately." As soon as she hung up, Margaret was overcome with intense anger and confusion. What was happening? Why was her mother trying to make her give up the job she had worked so hard to secure? "Sam, I need to go to Grandma's house. I'm going to call Jessica's mom and see if you can stay over tonight." Samantha looked anxious at her mother's distressed state but nodded. "Mom, are you okay?" "I'm fine, don't worry." Margaret tried to reassure her daughter, but she herself felt like her chest was being crushed with anxiety. Driving quickly, Margaret arrived at her mother's house 30 minutes later. Her anger was evident in the forceful way she knocked on the door. Vanessa opened the door. Seeing her sister, she feigned surprise. "Well, big sister. What brings you here at this hour? Where's Mother?" Margaret asked, trying to control her anger. "In the living room." But before that, Margaret cut off Vanessa's words and entered the house. In the living room, Eleanor was reading a magazine while drinking tea. When she saw Margaret, she smiled. The seemingly genuine smile only made Margaret angrier. "Maggie, what's wrong? You look upset. Can you explain about my job? Why did you contact Bradford Capital to decline the offer?" Margaret's voice trembled with anger. Eleanor placed her magazine on the table and elegantly took a sip of her tea. "Oh, that," she said as casually as if discussing the weather. "I recommended Vanessa instead because that job would be too difficult for you." Margaret was speechless. "What?" Eleanor stood up and walked to the window. "It's fine, Maggie. I asked an old friend who's an executive at the company to recommend Vanessa. She's better suited for that job. That job that I spent years preparing for, went through multiple interviews, and earned qualifications to get." Margaret shouted. "What right do you have to make decisions about my life?" At this moment, Vanessa entered the living room. There was a malicious smile on her face. "A housekeeper suits you better, big sister. It's best for you to just be a mom taking care of your daughter. You're not cut out for a career." Margaret was shocked, speechless. "Why would you do this?" "Maggie, calm down," Eleanor said coldly. "A single mother couldn't possibly handle such an important job. How were you planning to work late every night? What about Samantha?" "That's for me to decide. Samantha and I make our own decisions." "See how emotional she's getting already." Eleanor exchanged glances with her younger daughter. "That's proof you can't handle it. Vanessa can do the job calmly." Margaret was stunned. "You've always been like this. Never acknowledging anything I do, always favoring Vanessa." Her voice caught. "Why? Why do you hate me so much?" Eleanor looked at Margaret as if looking at a son. "I don't hate you. This is for your own good." "For my own good?" Margaret gave a bitter laugh. "Ruining my life is for my own good." "You're being dramatic," Vanessa interjected. "It's not like your life is over. You can just focus on raising your child. Or, can't you do that?" This comment pushed Margaret's anger to its peak. "Enough. What you've done is unforgivable. I'm going to contact Bradford Capital right now and tell them the truth. It's pointless, Eleanor said coldly. James is an old friend, and it's already decided. Vanessa starts work next week. Margaret looked at her mother and sister, unable to find any familial love in them. Her chest ached, and tears welled up in her eyes. Fine, she said quietly. But this isn't over. Margaret left the house. Once in her car, tears streamed down her cheeks. Thinking about Samantha made her chest tighten further. How would she explain this to her daughter? How could she answer the question of why Grandma and Aunt Vanessa were bullying Mom? As she drove toward Jessica's house, Margaret made a resolution. I won't let my mother and sister control my life anymore, she vowed to herself. She would look for a new job tomorrow and consider legal options if necessary. For Samantha's sake, and especially for her own, she had to fight back against this injustice. Her phone rang. It was her friend Jessica, calling to let her know that Samantha had arrived safely and was now playing with her daughter. Somewhat relieved, Margaret pulled over to the side of the road and took a deep breath. I can be strong. I will overcome this. Looking up at the twilight sky, Margaret repeated these words to herself. After spending the night at Jessica's house, Margaret sprang into action early the next morning. First, she tried to contact Bradford Capital's HR department to explain the situation. However, James Collins was absent, and the person who answered simply told her coldly, a replacement has already been decided. Please at least give me an opportunity to meet, Margaret persisted, but she only received the response, this is a decision from upper management. Margaret, unwilling to give up, was about to head directly to the office with her resume when Jessica stopped her. Margaret, you need to calm down and think of a different strategy, Jessica said, offering her a cup of coffee. First, you should look for a new job. With your qualifications, you'll surely find another opportunity soon. But Margaret was at a loss for words. She was devastated to lose the position she had spent years preparing for in such a manner. Think of Samantha, Jessica gently advised. She knows you're a strong mother. How would she feel if you fell apart now? Margaret exhaled deeply at Jessica's words. You're right. That afternoon, Margaret picked up Samantha from school, and they returned to their small apartment. She explained to her daughter simply, there's a small issue with Mommy's new job, so I'll be looking for something else. But Grandma. Samantha began, but Margaret gently interrupted her. It's complicated adult business. Don't worry about it. However, Samantha was perceptive. Did Grandma and Aunt Vanessa bully you, Mom? Margaret struggled to hold back tears at the question. Sometimes, even family members can't understand each other. But it's okay. We have our own path. That night, after Samantha had gone to bed, Margaret began searching for new job opportunities. While not as prestigious as Bradford Capital, several investment companies were looking for financial analysts. She decided to send out application materials immediately. A week passed, and Margaret received interview invitations from 2 companies. Meanwhile, there had been no contact from her mother Eleanor. Even when Samantha asked, "Can I call Grandma?" Margaret could only reply, "We need a little more time." One morning, as Margaret was preparing for an interview, her cell phone suddenly rang. The screen displayed Bradford Capital. She answered in surprise. "This is Margaret Wilson." "Ms. Wilson, this is Robert Blackwell, CEO of Bradford Capital." Margaret gasped. A direct call from the CEO. "Yes, how can I help you?" "A serious issue has arisen, and I'd like to speak with you directly. Could you come to our office this afternoon?" Though confused, Margaret replied, "Yes, of course. Thank you." And Mr. Blackwell hesitated for a moment. "Please ask your mother and Vanessa to come as well." After hanging up, Margaret couldn't understand what was happening. However, before contacting her mother and sister, she wanted to get some clues. She called Jessica to explain the situation and asked her to pick up Samantha from school. Then, she headed to her mother's house. When she arrived at Eleanor's house, it was surprisingly quiet. When she rang the doorbell, her mother eventually opened the door. Her face had lost its usual arrogance and looked somewhat anxious. "Maggie," Eleanor said, sounding surprised. "I believe you received a call from Bradford Capital's CEO," Margaret said calmly. "He wants to meet with the three of us." The blood drained from Eleanor's face. "From Robbie. What happened?" Margaret asked sharply. At this moment, Vanessa could be seen coming down the stairs. She too had lost her usual arrogance and looked pale. "Big sister," Vanessa began, but Margaret raised her hand to stop her. 3 p.m. this afternoon at Bradford Capital's office. The CEO wants to meet with all of us. If you know something, you'd better tell me now. Suddenly, her mother's cell phone rang loudly. Eleanor looked at the phone and lost even more color in her face. "It's from Robbie." Margaret stood still, watching her mother answer the call. "Yes, this is Eleanor," her mother's voice was trembling. Shouting could be heard from the other end of the phone. Even standing in the next room, Margaret could clearly hear the angry voice. "Eleanor, you asked for special hiring because we're friends, and you lied that your daughter had Margaret's background and achievements. Vanessa can't even handle basic spreadsheet operations and embarrassed us at this morning's client meeting. I want an explanation." Eleanor tried to make excuses, but the voice on the phone grew even louder. "Submitting 10 years of false credentials is practically a criminal act. Come to the office right now with both your daughters. I've contacted Margaret too. We need to get to the truth." When the call ended, a heavy silence fell over the room. Margaret was too shocked for words. Eleanor stood frozen, still clutching the phone. "You used my credentials?" Margaret asked in a trembling voice. Eleanor didn't answer, but from the top of the stairs, Vanessa weakly said, "Mom said we should. She said since my background wasn't good enough, we should use Big Sister's 10 years of experience and qualifications. And you threw me under the bus." Tears welled up in Margaret's eyes. "Why? Why would you go so far to hurt me?" Eleanor finally raised her face. "I thought you were bound to fail. Having a child so young but refusing to give up on your career, you were supposed to stumble eventually. But you succeeded. Contrary to my expectations. I couldn't stand it." Eleanor's voice was barely audible. "I wanted to give Vanessa a chance. She has nothing." Margaret trembled with anger and sadness. "You've always looked down on me. Ever since Samantha was born, no, even before that. But this time, I can't forgive you. You stole my 10 years of hard work and threatened the livelihood of Samantha and me." "I'm sorry," Vanessa finally said. "I couldn't do the job at all. I completely failed at an important presentation this morning." "So that's how the truth came out," Margaret said calmly. "And it didn't even last a week." The three women faced each other in silence, as if all the family's long-standing distortions had surfaced. "Get in the car," Margaret quietly commanded. "Let's go to Bradford Capital. It's time to tell the whole truth." In the car, Eleanor said in a small voice, "I told Robert that Margaret was a single mother without flexible time, so Vanessa would be more suitable. He initially objected, but as a special favor to our friendship, he hired Vanessa." Margaret kept her eyes on the road and said nothing. Various emotions swirled inside her: anger, sadness, the pain of betrayal, and a strange sense of liberation. The reason why her mother had never acknowledged her all these years was now clear. The Bradford Capital high-rise came into view. Margaret took a deep breath. "I don't know what's going to happen, but I want to tell you one thing," she told her mother and sister. From today, our relationship changes. I will never forgive anyone who hurt Samantha and me again. The three women entering the elevator looked as solemn as if heading to a final judgment. The conference room on the 45th floor of Bradford Capitol was surrounded by large windows overlooking the Philadelphia skyline. On one side of the table sat CEO Robert Blackwell and several executives with stern expressions. Margaret, her mother Eleanor, and her sister Vanessa sat opposite them in a row. "Thank you for coming," Blackwell began in a cold voice. "We need to discuss a very serious matter today." The tension in the conference room was palpable. Margaret sat with her back straight, trying to maintain her composure. Eleanor looked older than her years, and Vanessa was shrinking in fear. "Let's start by confirming the facts," Blackwell reviewed the documents on the table. "Ms. Margaret Wilson, you were officially offered the position of Senior Financial Analyst at our company, correct?" "Yes, that's right," Margaret answered in a calm voice. "And your mother, Eleanor Wilson, contacted us to decline the offer without your knowledge. At the same time, she recommended your sister, Vanessa Wilson, as a replacement." "Yes," Margaret confirmed. Blackwell turned to Eleanor. "Eleanor, you and I have known each other for 30 years, but this matter goes beyond friendship. You submitted Margaret's background and achievements as Vanessa's resume. Is this true?" Eleanor took a glass of water with trembling hands, took a sip, and then said, "Robbie, I." "Please answer the question," Blackwell said sternly. Eleanor sighed. "Yes, I did." At those words, the air in the conference room froze. "Why did you do such a thing?" "I wanted to give Vanessa a chance," Eleanor answered weakly. "She has talent, but no opportunities." "Talent?" Blackwell frowned. "Vanessa couldn't perform even the most basic financial analysis at this morning's client meeting. She embarrassed us in front of our key clients." Vanessa blushed and lowered her gaze. "Furthermore," Blackwell continued, "our investigation revealed that Margaret's qualification certificates and performance reports had been altered to show Vanessa's name. This isn't just a recommendation issue, it potentially involves document forgery." Eleanor turned ashen. "I didn't mean to." "Let me show you the evidence," Blackwell signaled to the HR representative. The representative displayed several documents on the screen. They clearly showed Margaret's resume with only the name changed to Vanessa's. "And what's even more problematic is this," Blackwell pointed to another document. An email found on Vanessa's computer. The screen displayed an email from Vanessa to Eleanor. "Mom, using Big Sister's background, surely no one will notice. I'll learn the financial knowledge quickly, so it'll be fine. Thank you for this opportunity." Margaret was too shocked for words. She stared at her mother and sister. It became clear that they had deliberately tried to ruin her life, not just out of momentary jealousy or frustration. I didn't know," Vanessa weakly made excuses. "Mom said Big Sister didn't really want this job." "That's a lie." Margaret's suppressed anger finally exploded. "You two have been trying to bring me down from the start. You stole the career I built desperately as a single mother and tried to ruin my life." "Margaret," Blackwell gently placed his hand on her shoulder. "You are not at fault. In fact, your abilities are genuine." He placed another document on the table. "This is your original resume and your evaluation during the hiring process. You received the highest score among our candidates. That was purely based on your abilities and knowledge." Margaret was so moved that she could barely hold back tears. "Our company does not tolerate such misconduct," Blackwell said in a stern voice. "Eleanor, Vanessa, this situation would normally warrant legal action." Eleanor looked up. "Robbie, for the sake of our long friendship. Please stop using friendship as a shield," Blackwell said, controlling his anger. "You betrayed my trust. You caused damage to the company and treated a talented individual unfairly. After a moment of silence, Blackwell turned back to Margaret. Ms. Wilson, we would like to honor your original offer. Furthermore, to demonstrate our confidence in your abilities, we would like to welcome you as the leader of an important project. Margaret was surprised. Really? Of course, Blackwell smiled. Your capabilities are genuine. Considering the emotional distress you've suffered from this incident, we've prepared conditions beyond what was initially planned. He handed her a document. It detailed a higher salary than initially offered, flexible working hours, and access to childcare support programs. Discrimination based on being a single mother goes against our company policy, Blackwell said with a serious expression. Rather, we respect the fact that you've worked so hard and achieved so much under difficult circumstances. Margaret tried to express her gratitude but was too overwhelmed to speak. She could only nod deeply. Now, regarding Eleanor and Vanessa, Blackwell returned to his stern expression. We will not take legal action, but this incident will be reported to our business partners and related industries. Eleanor, the credibility you've built will be lost. Eleanor slumped her shoulders, looking defeated. Vanessa said through tears, I'm truly sorry. I was jealous. I couldn't stand seeing big sister succeed. Margaret finally regained her composure and stood up. I understand, Mr. Blackwell. Thank you for your kindness. Then she turned to her mother and sister. I will never be used again. Our relationship ends today. She continued in a trembling voice, for Samantha's sake, and for my own, I cannot continue such a relationship. What I want to teach my daughter is that you can't call someone family just because of blood ties without love or respect. Don't come back into my life. Eleanor gasped in shock. Maggie, you can't. My name is Margaret, she said calmly. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I'll start working next week. Margaret held her head high as she left the conference room. As she entered the elevator, she felt as if a burden she had carried for years was lifting from her shoulders. Wilson team, is the proposal ready? In a Bradford Capital conference room, Margaret smiled as she addressed her staff. A year had passed, and she had been promoted to Deputy Director of the Financial Analysis Division. Her team had become known as the most successful group in the company. Yes, everything is ready, a young analyst answered confidently. Excellent, Margaret nodded with satisfaction. Then let's begin the presentation. The presentation was a huge success. The client was impressed with her analytical skills and persuasiveness, leading to a new major contract. When Margaret returned to her office after the meeting, an envelope was placed on her desk. Her heart rate increased at the familiar handwriting. It was a letter from Eleanor. Margaret took a deep breath and opened the envelope. Dear Margaret. Only after losing everything did I truly understand the weight of what I had done. From the bottom of my heart, I apologize for hurting you and Samantha. I won't make excuses. I was wrong. I hear about your success. I'm proud of you. Truly. You may not believe me now, but Vanessa has changed too. She went back to learning accounting basics and has started working at a small company. She also wants to apologize to you. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I just hope that someday we can talk as family again. With love. Mother. Margaret finished reading the letter and gazed out the window. Philadelphia was beginning to be tinged with twilight. Various emotions swirled in her heart, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. That evening, Margaret and Samantha were enjoying dinner in their new apartment. Through the large living room window, the city's night view was visible. Her daughter was happily talking about school, and Margaret listened with satisfaction. Hey Mom, it's been a year, Samantha suddenly said. Aren't you going to see Grandma and Aunt Vanessa? Margaret looked into her daughter's intelligent eyes. I received a letter from Grandma. What did it say? Words of apology, Margaret quietly answered. Samantha asked carefully, choosing her words, are you going to forgive them? Margaret put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. Time can heal some things. It won't ever be exactly the same, but, someday, we might rebuild a relationship in a limited way. But for now, let's cherish our own happiness, Margaret smiled. We're the strong Wilson family. The two of us make a wonderful family on our own. Samantha hugged her mother tightly. Mom, you're the strongest mom in the world. Outside the window, stars were beginning to shine. Margaret took a deep breath. Life is unpredictable and sometimes cruel, but if you continue to believe in your own worth, a path will surely open. And she understood from the bottom of her heart that true family isn't necessarily defined by blood ties, but by relationships built on mutual respect and support.